Mr. President, I want to rise to also support my colleagues on the Veterans Affairs Committee. It's an honor to serve with the chairman of that committee, the distinguished senior senator from Georgia, the ranking member from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal. And one of the great honors about being on that committee is not just serving our veterans, but it's a committee that gets a lot of work done. It's a very bipartisan committee, and that's why so many of us are coming to the Senate floor to talk about this important issue: accountability for the VA. Now, Mr. President, I was home in Alaska this past weekend, and as I often do, I run into veterans. You know, every state here in the Union likes to talk about their veterans, brag a little bit. Well, my state, we have more veterans per capita of any state in the Union. We're very proud of that. And I was talking to a Vietnam veteran on Saturday, actually on Friday in Anchorage. And combat veteran, corpsman, saved a lot of Marines during his time. And he had such deep frustration about this issue of accountability with the VA. As a matter of fact, he used to work at the VA, and it was the one issue he raised with me. How can we do more with regard to accountability? He reads about it in the paper. And the key here, Mr. President, is that in that conversation, and so many conversations I have with veterans back home, is that we must restore the bond of trust between the VA and the veterans that the VA serves. Because we all know that that bond of trust is eroded. And trust is eroded when no one is accountable. Trust is eroded when no one is accountable. And my colleagues have already talked about it, but once again, it's very disappointing to see the VA walking away from accountability as opposed to embracing it. So Senator Tillis did a great job of describing the bill that was signed by the President in 2014, the Choice Act, which had some strong accountability measures. And yet, just recently, the Attorney General of the United States sided with the argument of a former Phoenix VA director who was at the helm when as many as 40 veterans died waiting for health care. The Attorney General of the United States sided with her argument and is not even testing the accountability provisions in this new law. It was passed by this body and signed by the President. She just quit. Didn't even let the courts declare that this law is unconstitutional. She just quit and sided with that argument. I think that's an outrage. And what it does, it undermines this issue of trust. It's also a dangerous precedent by allowing the head of the VA and the Attorney General of the United States to substitute the judgment of the Congress of the United States in a law and saying we're not even going to defend this issue anymore is a precedent that I don't think anyone in this body would agree with. Essentially gutting the accountability provisions in a recently enacted law signed by the President Obama, and they're not even trying to defend those. This is exactly the kind of action that further erodes the trust between the VA and our veterans. So yesterday, in a hearing chaired by the senior senator from Georgia, we demanded bipartisan approach that the Attorney General or her representative get before the VA committee very soon and explain what she's up to. Because I don't think anyone in this body is agreeing with the actions that they're taking. And while we're waiting for answers from the Attorney General, we are not going to give up on the critically important issue of VA accountability, which is why moving forward on the Veterans First Act, which does focus on accountability, is so important, and why we're on the floor making the case for this. This bill, which I'm a co-sponsor of, currently has 44 co-sponsors and support from multiple veteran service organizations. You've heard about some of the important accountability measures that are in this bill. Again, I want to thank the great leadership of Chairman Isaacson and Ranking Member Blumenthal on this. But what we need to do is move forward on this bill and restore this issue of trust. And the best way we can restore the issue of trust is our veterans knowing that the leadership of the VA is accountable. Remember, the leadership of the VA works for our veterans. And when they see people getting away with malfeasance and incorrect behavior, that trust is further eroded. I yield the floor back to Chairman Isaacson.